Welcome to the Mindset Architect Podcast, where it's all about creating the life you want, the business you want, and making a real difference. Join us in unlocking the code to true success. And now your host, Tony Caliendo, Master Coach with reTHINK Coaching.
Welcome to the Mindset Architect Podcast, episode number 156. I'm Tony Caliendo, author of the book Less Over More, and executive coach here at reTHINK Coaching. As always, I want to start by thanking you for sharing your time with me. Time truly is our greatest asset, and the fact that you're willing to share your time with me truly does mean a great deal. So thank you for being here. So today I'm going to say, get ready. This episode is one that took a lot of preparation, and I have a lot of notes that I want to go over with you. And it's about an important topic. As of late, I would say probably the last 6 months to a year, this word grit has been coming up a lot in conversations I've had with people. And not ego saying this, but a lot of times people have said that about me. Gosh, you sure have grit. You sure have tenacity to be doing what you're doing, writing the book, and to be doing it at such a high level when we know it's not easy, it's difficult, and all of that. And I started thinking about that word grit. And I think sometimes some of us, and I will say at first, I held on to it like a little badge of honor, like, yeah, I do have grit. And I think that grit can become a trap if we're not careful in how we define or we allow grit to be part of our everyday business and life, relationships, whatever it is. So I want to talk about grit today and maybe change the way that you think about it. If you think about it, and I don't think it's a bad thing, if you do think about it like I did momentarily as this badge of honor, I want to challenge you that we're applying it the correct way so that it can be used in a positive, beneficial way that may be how we've been looking at it in the past. So the number one thing I want to start with is I think we may have misunderstood grit. I think we've been all taught to admire people who refuse to quit. That person who gets knocked down, gets up, gets knocked down, gets up. They push through adversity. They are working hard, right? They keep going when everybody else gives up. They tend to work harder, stay later, sacrifice more, and they find a way. There is a lot of value in that. I'm not diminishing that. Grit is part of almost every meaningful success story that we know about. But here's the question I really want you, and I think that is rarely asked. What are you being gritty about? Grit's not automatically good simply because it's difficult, right? You can show tremendous grit pushing towards a goal that you no longer want. You can show tremendous grit in a role that you have outgrown. You can show tremendous grit to make a business model work that the market has already rejected. Maybe you're holding a lifestyle together that's exhausting you. You can show tremendous grit, proving something to people whose opinion should not be determining your future. I feel like that's where a lot of our old definition about grit hangs out. And this is where high achievers can get trapped when they're looking at old ways or old definitions of grit. We've trained ourselves to push through discomfort, again, like it's a badge of honor. It becomes part of our identity, where we're gritty, we're tenacious, we can make anything happen. And when something stops working in our world as a high achiever who might be using grit in a not so empowering way, we have trained ourselves that when something stops working, our first instinct is not to reevaluate it. It's to push through it. It's to figure out how to get through this. And it's our instinct to work harder, add more effort, add more discipline, more hours, expend more energy on it. We automatically flip to that versus taking a step back and saying, okay, hold on, let me reassess this and reevaluate it to make sure it's worthy of me doing all of those things with the energy and the time and the effort to get through it. So the question I would like for you to consider to explore is this difficult because it's worth doing? I think it's really important. Or is it difficult because I am forcing something that no longer fits, again, wearing grit as a badge of honor? Am I persevering towards something that I still want? Am I just doing it because it's what I've always done? Or am I simply proving that I can survive it? Those are some traits of high performance folks and high driven people. So, some of us wake up after building a successful career or business and only to realize that it's not what they want anymore. But they keep pushing, they keep going through it, they try to be grateful, they don't quit. And that's grit. But is that really the right grit? Persistence is only powerful when you're persisting towards what still matters. So think about that. If you're pushing grit through, are you using it on what matters, or are you doing it because it's what you think you should do? I think that's really, really important. I've been victim, if you will, and I don't love that word, of doing this myself, that I'm just going to push through. I got to make this work. It's worked in the past. I can't stop. I need to figure this out and just get through it. If I could just keep going, it's all going to be okay. And using that grit. And sometimes just that simple question is, am I using that grit towards something that still matters, is really important, because grit takes a tremendous amount of energy, effort, time, and commitment. Number 2 thing to consider about grit, and I love this, is sometimes grit is really just fear in disguise. One of the things I find most interesting about grit is that sometimes what looks like strength from the outside is actually fear underneath. So we would say publicly, you know what, I'm not a quitter. And I have said that many, many times on the journey to getting this book written. And I meant it. And it was the thing worth putting effort and grit towards. However, sometimes what we mean by this, I'm not a quitter, is that we don't want to look like a failure to the general public, to our peers in our industry, to our family, to our friends. We don't want to disappoint someone. We don't want to admit that maybe we made the wrong choice. Like, this decision was not a great decision. We don't want to lose what we've already invested. I've heard this many, many times. I'm so far into this with this client who's the wrong client, who's probably never going to do what I need them to do, but I've invested so much time. Why would I want to stop? And so we infuse grit, and really it's just fear of potentially losing a client. I don't know who I am if I stop doing this. That's a big one. And I don't know what comes next. There is a difference between commitment and attachment. So grit sometimes can just be attachment versus commitment. Commitment says, this matters and I'm willing to work for it. Attachment says, I don't know how to let this go. I don't know who I would be without it. They can look the same from the outside, yet internally they're going to feel really different. Think about that, commitment versus attachment. You can be attached to doing something that's no longer effective for you, that is no longer in alignment for you, that is no longer your goal, but we've attached to it and we're using grit to push through it, versus the commitment saying, you know what, the book matters. The late nights, the staying up to 1 o'clock in the morning, writing that last chapter to get submitted for approval from my agent, all of that is a commitment versus attachment. This is where grit can become complicated though, right? And we want to make sure that fear is not gaining power, because we believe that if we quit this, am I still successful? We have those doubts in our mind. If I leave this role, am I still a leader? If I change this goal, does that mean that the last 5 years were wasted? If I stop being the person everyone depends on, who am I? This is where grit can get convoluted and complicated. Sometimes continuing is easier than confronting the possibility that you've changed, or your goal has changed, or the model that you're working to has changed. It's really important. So some questions you might want to ask yourself if you're feeling this is, what are you afraid will happen if you stop? Who are you afraid of disappointing? What would change direction? What would changing direction mean about you? Are you staying because the goal matters, or because leaving feels like failure? Not quitting is not always the same thing as moving forward. If you are not quitting the wrong more, you're not moving forward, team. You're putting energy towards the wrong thing. This is where grit can be a lie. This is where grit can mask and cover doing the right thing for you. So not quitting is not always the same thing as moving forward. I think that's really important to consider when you're looking at is this grit due to commitment or attachment? Two very different things. Number 3, grit without clarity becomes endurance. This is really important for those of your high performers, high drivers that definitely are on your way to seeing bigger things or bigger opportunities for yourself. Highly capable people can tolerate a lot. They can carry heavy workloads. They can solve complex problems. They can function under incredible pressure. They can keep a team together. They can work through exhaustion. They can continue performing long after something has stopped feeling sustainable. And because they can, people assume they should, and so do they. Sometimes we will assume that ourselves, but capability and alignment are not the same thing. You may be able to carry something, but if it's not in alignment, what are you carrying? What are you pushing through? Why are you doing it? You might be able to run the department, but still hate running the department. You may be able to manage the client and still know that they're not a fit. I see this happen often. It's that grit. I'm going to push through it. I'm going to make it work with this person. I've invested so many hours. I'm not going to stop. You might be able to maintain the pace and still recognize that the pace is costing you too much. I know that we've all done this where we're working harder than ever and we can maintain it. Yet what is it costing you? Time with your family, enjoyment, joy, alignment, congruency. What's it costing you? You might be able to hit the goal and realize you don't care about the goal anymore, but you were so in it to win and to lean into grit that you lost sight of what the goal was. And if it mattered to you anymore, it's okay if a goal suddenly doesn't matter to you if you're going to pivot and change it. This is where grit can quietly turn into endurance, and endurance by itself is not success. Your entire definition of success becomes, I survived another week. I got through it. I handled that client 3 times this week. We're moving on. We're doing something different. But we might want to have a different conversation than that. Think about that. Is that very motivating? Is that very fulfilling to just say, I survived another week because my grit and my determination got me through? What if we simply asked, am I building something or am I simply enduring something? Are you building or are you enduring? Huge difference. Building to me is exciting. Enduring to me is painful. They're not the same, right? Business owner that works 70 hours a week may just say to themselves, this is what entrepreneurship looks like. But maybe the better question is, why does the business require 70 hours from you? Is it growth, poor boundaries, wrong item that you're chasing, model that's no longer working and should be changed, inability to let go of control? And grit might be helping you tolerate a problem really that you need to be solved. So just because you can carry it does not mean that you should do it. It just simply doesn't mean that. You know, it's funny. I think about in my hotel career, and I think I've shared with you, I had a wonderful career with Marriott Hotels. Probably one of the best experiences I had in a corporate environment was that company. It taught me so much. And I think about grit. I was on this journey to become a general manager of my own hotel. I was on this journey for bigger things all the time. And I remember the moment that I was gunning for working towards a position as a GM, a general manager, and that's in operations. The majority of my career up until that time had been in sales, which is where I excelled. You know, sales manager, senior sales manager, director of sales, senior director, all of that fun stuff. And I did really, really well. But I felt like I needed to do this upside. I knew in my heart, I knew in my gut, operations was not where I belonged. It wasn't. Could I do it? Yes. Did I do it at a high level? Absolutely. But everything that I talked about in this, right? Attachment versus commitment, I was attached to. And it didn't serve me because at some point I got burned out. And I believe it is the reason I left the hospitality industry, because I said yes to something. And because of my stubbornness, my tenacity, my grit, I was going to make it work. And I did. And I did very well. Yet it was that, oh my gosh, I survived another week feeling. Oh my gosh, I finally got through the day. I got through this, I got through that. That was what I was experiencing. If I simply would have stayed true to what was important to me and used my grit towards sales, it would have been a different story. Using grit in the wrong way or the wrong area is simply exhausting and depleting your resources. So I always say it felt like I was pushing a string uphill. That to me is somewhat a definition of the wrong grit. Can I do it? Yes. Is it exhausting? Yes. Do I feel energized after I'm done? No. Why am I doing it? What's the goal? So grit can have a lot of different legs that we need to pay attention to. The number 4 thing, which this really ties into the concept of less over more, which is really important, is that subtraction requires grit too. And I've talked to you all about this, and it's in the book, and I would encourage you to order it today, is subtraction is a path to success. Yet that takes grit. That takes determination to consciously decide to remove something takes energy, takes courage, right? We normally think that grit means you're going to hold on. You're going to hold on to the bitter end. You're going to cross that finish line, tattered and torn and exhausted, but you're going to get there. But what if there's another kind of grit that requires less attention? And that is the grit required to let go. Saying no to more money, saying no from a role that you thought that you wanted. Me thinking I wanted to be in operations of a hotel, ending a business strategy that worked for years, changing a goal that other people celebrated and coveted. Gosh, how many of you have hit a goal that other people would just be so grateful that they were able to do? But we're going to walk away from that because it's not in alignment. It's a part of the subtraction. Giving someone else responsibility that you've always controlled, that's a leverage piece. Creating space in your calendar to show up as a better version of yourself, and choosing not to pursue an opportunity that everybody else thinks you should take. That was me in the hotel world. I've done that too in my coaching world, is I've taken on opportunities with organizations or within an organization to offer coaching when everything in me was saying, don't do it, but everybody else was saying, oh my gosh, you're a perfect fit for this. You should do it. You're going to do great. And I did it. And I did addition versus subtraction. Addition's easier than subtraction because subtraction goes against everything we know. Whoever has been taught to be more successful, to do less. That's the concept of the book, Less Over More. This is where grit really comes in because adding something will feel productive. That's the natural feeling. Adding something will feel like you're actually having movement forward. Adding something will give us a dopamine hit. It's that feel-good moment because we added something. Look at me. I'm amazing. I can keep adding. And sometimes that's a new strategy, a new client, new opportunity, new project, new goal, whatever it is. And subtraction, conversely, can feel like a loss if you are thinking about it in the old way. It can feel irresponsible. It can feel like you're moving backward. It can feel very uncomfortable. This is why embracing less sometimes takes more courage than embracing more. I've shared this. Since writing the book and doing some new programs, I had to shut down. I didn't have to. I chose to shut down a few group programs that I've been running for years that were very lucrative. I could do it with my eyes closed. It was very easy. However, it was an old strategy. It did feel like movement because people were signing up and staying with the program and all kinds of great things. Yet at the end of the day, it really was something that needed to be subtracted. Did it feel irresponsible to do that? Yes, in a couple ways. Was I letting people down? And I was taking a financial hit to myself and the company. Was that responsible to do that? So that form of subtraction took a moment for me to wrap my brain around. So it's okay when you feel like that. Traditional thinking, when we're living in a place of grit and tenacity, is why would you turn that down? Why would you give that up? Why would you end something? Why would you subtract something that has worked for you for so long? That's traditional thinking. Less over more style thinking is, what is this yes costing me? My saying yes to that group program over and over and over and just allowing it to roll and re-enrolling new people and starting it up again, that's grit. However, it was costing me a great deal on the other end. It was taking up space that something bigger warranted the space for. And it wasn't until I let it go that I was able to receive that. So what are you holding on to because letting go feels too uncomfortable? What opportunity are you afraid to say no to? What are you adding because subtraction feels like failure? Sometimes less requires more courage than more does. That's really important for us to think about. And it's a concept of the book, Less Over More. You get to decide what deserves your grit. Grit is a resource and it needs to be treated that way. Your discipline is a resource, your focus, your energy, your time. All of those are resources and none of them are unlimited. This means that not everything deserves equal perseverance. This is where we need a filter. This is where grit has to be really analyzed. Am I using it in the right way? Asking yourself some simple questions before you just push harder to get through. Does this still matter to me? Does this align with the life I'm trying to build? What would I choose this again today? Am I doing this because it matters or because I've already spent so much time on it? What is this costing me? What am I able to give energy to because this is, what am I not able to give energy to because this is consuming so much of it? This is really important when you're thinking about opportunity cost. If I do this, I get this, right? We've got to keep it in alignment to make sure it's what we're using grit for and that it's used for our good versus just for the sake of doing it. Every time you give grit to one thing, you're withholding grit from something else. So you better make sure that what you're giving it to is in alignment, that is moving you in the right direction versus just a direction you've always gone. If you're fighting to save the wrong client, you're probably not pursuing the right one. This happened to me over and over. Not in alignment with the client. We decide to part ways. I maybe assign them to another coach or wish them well. And suddenly somebody shows up that is a perfect fit. You keep pushing through an outdated system. You might not be building a better one because you don't have the time for it. There's a lot of things that can happen when you're using grit in the wrong way because you're stuck in old thinking. Before giving something more effort, so applying more grit, think about this. Does this deserve another year of my life? The question changes everything. Not another week, not another push, not another year. Would you still say yes? Your grit is too valuable to spend on everything. Treat grit as a limited resource and make sure you're applying it to the right things. Real grit, number 6, is staying true to what you've chosen. So real grit is staying true to what you've chosen. This is where you get to bring grit back into a positive place. I think grit is amazing. I think it's an amazing attribute. I think it's a powerful resource when it's applied correctly. Grit matters. The issue isn't grit itself. The issue is where we place it, where we choose to use it. Once you've done the work and you understand where you should be applying grit in a positive way, I promise you everything will change. Saying no when yes would be easier. Holding onto a boundary that you've set. Sticking with the plan long enough to get feedback. Tolerating discomfort without immediately changing direction. Really important about grit. Refusing to chase someone else's definition of success. This is a big part of Less Over More. Grit is choosing to follow your version of success versus somebody else's. So, my friends, here's what I'm going to say. Grit has a powerful place in all of our life. I think it's an admirable quality and trait. I think as humans, we are amazing. We are really more capable than what we ever know, and we can sustain and endure a lot. All I'm asking you to do today is to back up and assess where am I playing grit that's no longer serving me, but I'm just doing it because I've always done it. I'm just doing it to prove a point. I'm just doing it to get to this goal that I don't even know if I want anymore. It's when we don't pause and take a step back to assess and analyze that applying grit can be applied in the wrong way. Grit is not proving how much you can endure. It's having the courage to keep choosing what matters. Grit isn't proving how much you can endure. It's having the courage to keep choosing what matters. This is where grit and Less Over More are a perfect marriage, because once you identify the wrong more and you can ask yourself, am I using my superpower of grit on the wrong more? And I decide to stop doing that. Where can I now apply my grit that would make the right difference to the right more? All right, team, Less Over More. It is available anywhere you buy books. I'm going to encourage you and invite you to get a copy and start joining me on the journey of Less Over More. Thanks for being here. Go make it an amazing day. If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, you must come check out the Mindset Architect Group Coaching Program. It's our monthly program where we explore the power of your mindset, help you identify what you truly want in business and life, and then help you reach those goals. Come check us out at rethinkcoaching.com/group-program. That's rethinkcoaching.com/group-program. We'll see you there.